Good morning. Calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission regular weekly open meeting for Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. Thank you.
I'm going to take the roll call. Commissioner O'Connell,
Present.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Present.
Commissioner Ellison.
Present.
We have 3 commissioners present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So next item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance and the state pledge. So we'll stand for that. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we salute the state flag of New Mexico. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. So next item is consideration and approval of the agenda. Commissioners, do you have any discussion on the agenda that we have in front of us?
Yes, I have one thing. In terms of the prior meeting minutes, I would like some additional time to review those. So I would make a motion to move those to next week.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion because frankly, I agree. We got the minutes late this morning and I don't think they're ready for prime time right now.
We'll take a vote. Commissioner Ellison,
I agree.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The minutes are stricken from the agenda and moved to next week.
Okay, so moving forward with the remainder of the agenda, the next item is public comment. Hans, has anyone registered for public comment this morning?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I believe there is a person in attendance in the hearing room today, Mr. James Schichtel of El Paso Electric, who is Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, Government Affairs, and Economic Development. I believe he indicated that he would like to address the commission for public comment today.
Yeah, thank you, Hans. And Mr. Schichtel is in the room as you predicted. So you join us at the microphone here and remember to push the button so the green light comes on.
And I just wanted to introduce myself. I hadn't had a chance to be at an open meeting yet and say hello to you all. I hope to have an opportunity to have discussions also later, but just wanted to come and present myself in El Paso Electric and say we're excited about moving forward this year. And we're looking forward to meeting you all in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schichtel. Okay, so next item on the agenda is recitation in accordance with NMSA section 10-15-1J regarding closed meeting held on January 25th. So I'll make that recitation now. And then this is the first open meeting we've had since a second closed session. So I'm going to make both recitations now. So on January 25th, the commission met in executive session, which was closed pursuant to section 10-15-1H2, limited personnel matters. Discussion and the items discussed were discussion of hiring of individual public employees. The only matters discussed were the commissioner interviews with chief of staff candidates, assessment of candidates, and an assessment of the general counsel position. So the second recitation is the commission also met on January 31st in executive session, which was closed pursuant to section 10-15-1 H2, limited personnel matters, discussion of hiring of individual public employees. At that meeting, the only matters discussed were commissioner interviews with chief of staff candidates and assessment of chief of staff candidates. We're moving right along. The next item on the agenda is the consent action items. We have 3 items on the consent agenda, 3 transportation cases. Commissioners, do you have any discussion of consent items or a motion to approve?
No discussion. I don't have anything either, so I would move to approve the consent action items.
Yeah, I'll second that motion, and seeing no disagreement, we will adopt the item on the consent action agenda. So the next item on the agenda is a utility matter, case 22-00286 UT, with a presentation from Judith Amer. So please take it away, Ms. Amer.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This matter comes before you today upon the filing of Southwestern Public Service Company on November 18th, 2022, of its application for revision of its retail rates under advice notice 312. Also requesting authority to abandon Plant X Unit 1, Plant X Unit 2, and Cunningham Unit 1 generating stations, and amend the abandonment of the toll generating station and other associated relief. On November 30th, 2022, the initial order suspending the rates was issued by the commission, and a hearing examiner was assigned. On December 23rd, 2022, the hearing examiner issued a procedural order which set the matter for hearing on June 5th. It also established a May 8th, 2023 deadline for submission of a stipulation. If the parties submit a stipulation by May 8th, 4 months will remain on the suspension period for the commission to consider the stipulation. The issue before you today involves the hearing examiner's procedural order paragraph L, which states, and I'll quote, if any parties request consideration of a stipulation, the hearing examiner may refuse to consider the stipulation or condition consideration of the stipulation on the stipulating parties' agreement to toll the running of the suspension period for the period of time beginning with the commencement of the parties' settlement negotiations and ending with the final commission action on the stipulation. At the pre-hearing procedural conference, SPS explained their position regarding this provision, which was that it was a disincentive on settlement. And SPS at that conference requested the hearing examiner consider removing the tolling provision. The hearing examiner denied the request and stated that the procedural orders provision was consistent with New Mexico law and past commission precedent, and would provide the commission with a full, complete, and appropriate period of time to review the uncontested stipulation. And if necessary, the commission would still have time, in the event that it rejected the stipulation, it would still have time to consider the original application. On December 27th, 2022, SPS filed a motion for interlocutory appeal, appealing the tolling provision. And under the rules, the hearing examiner, it's 1.2.2.31 is the commission rule pertaining to interlocutory appeals. The hearing examiner has 15 days to consider to either grant the interlocutory appeal, deny the interlocutory appeal, or if the hearing examiner does neither, it is deemed denied by operation of law. the 15-day period ran. The hearing examiner did not issue an approval or a denial, so it was deemed denied by operation of law. According to the rule, SPS had 3 days within which to file an appeal of the denial. And that date was January 11th. And on that date, SPS did file its appeal of the denial. No, I believe on January 17th, they filed the appeal of the hearing examiner's denial. The arguments that SPS has made regarding its motion for an interlocutory appeal and its actual appeal is that it understands that the hearing examiner is endeavoring to implement what has been commission policy on suspension periods of rate case. However, in circumstances where the application is submitted in accordance with the procedural order, it would not impact the resolution of the proceeding according to SPS, and it would have a serious chilling effect on the parties' ability to discuss settlement or reach a stipulation. Their arguments, I will try to summarize this briefly, that it significantly impacts the parties to this case as well as parties to other future rate cases. SPS points out that the New Mexico Supreme Court in cases has held that the Public Utility Act requires the commission to issue decisions on utility rate applications in certain time periods under section 6287C. And SPS argues that there's no other provision of the PUA that would authorize the commission to suspend a utility's proposed rates for an indefinite period of time, simply because the parties propose to enter into a stipulation. SPS argues that such a requirement is inconsistent with the commission obligation to hear and decide cases with reasonable promptness. Okay. Their next point is that SPS, it does not matter that the tolling provision is purported to be conditioned upon agreement of the parties, because a public utility should not have to choose between agreeing with other stakeholders on a stipulation or the reasonable promptness of a decision on their rate increase application. Their next point is the tolling provision is inconsistent with New Mexico's public policy of encouraging settlements. SPS quotes a New Mexico case in Ray PNM 110 PUR 4th 69 for the proposition that a cooperative approach may be more effective in reconciling the interests of all the parties than would the polarization which often accompanies adversarial proceedings. SPS's next point is that if the tolling provision is adopted, rate cases will not be resolved by settling, and it would delay the utilities' rate recovery for months, perhaps even indefinitely. SPS's next point is that it may increase rate case expenses if it discourages settlement. SPS's next point is that the procedural order establishes deadlines for submitting stipulations, and those deadlines provide the commission sufficient period of time to review the stipulation before the suspension period expires. SPS also makes the point that uncontested stipulations perhaps should be treated differently than contested stipulations. because an uncontested stipulation, according to SPS, may be quicker for that the commission to consider. SPS argues that indefinite tolling it harms SPS because they're precluded from recovering their costs of providing service. SPS refers to its previous rate case 20-00238, where it filed an application for new rates on January 4th, 2021, but did not receive a final order until February 16th, 2022, even though the parties had submitted an uncontested stipulation on June 23rd, 2021. In that case, the suspension period was told for more than 7 months, not quite 8 months, and that the case final decision was not rendered until 13 months from the date of filing. Under the Public Utility Act, rate cases are suspended for a period of 9 months, but can be extended for an additional 3 months if the commission finds good cause. In conclusion, SPS argues that the goal of stipulations is to expedite proceedings and conserve resources, and that the tolling of the suspension period thwarts these goals. SPS maintains that guidance at this point in this case is critical. We did receive a response from Louisiana Energy Services and the federal executive agencies. They suggested a middle ground approach where there would be an extension of the suspension period for a definite period of time upon the filing of the stipulation. They contend that this approach would avoid administrative inefficiency to either have to start the case over by requiring a new advice notice, or in the event the commission rejects the stipulation, it would still allow parties sufficient time to consider the stipulation, as well as reasonable time for the commission to consider the main case in the event of rejection of the stipulation. LES and FEA state they recognize that an indefinite suspension can be unfair to the utility in that it could significantly delay a needed rate increase, contrary to the deadlines set forth in the Public Utility Act, Section 6287C. Plus, according to LES and FEA, an indefinite suspension could also erode a utility's economic incentive to pursue settlements due to the risk of indefinite suspension. New Mexico Large Customer Group filed a statement of position and stated it supported the motion for interlocutory appeal. There are two proposed orders before the commission today. One would grant the interlocutory appeal for purposes of allowing the new commission to consider the precedent of the previous commission of tolling the suspension period upon filing of a stipulation. It would require briefing by the parties by next Wednesday, February 8th, and then the commission would make a final decision. The alternate order is proposed by Commissioner O'Connell. It would be an order denying the interlocutory appeal and finding the following. This is from the proposed alternate order denying the interlocutory appeal. It would find that the tolling language is an established commission precedent. that it would further find that SPS and the other parties under the express language of the procedural order have the freedom of choice to agree or not to agree to the tolling language. Consequently, here, as in previous case 19-00170, where the commission similarly denied SPS's motion for interlocutory appeal on this issue. This issue is premature at this time because there is no actual issue that's ripe for determination because the tolling has not yet occurred and the parties may not even be able to agree on a settlement. An immediate appeal is not necessary to materially advance the ultimate disposition of this proceeding, and there's no actual harm that has occurred to SPS. The proposed order also states that late filing of stipulated agreements in suspended rate cases shortens the time for the commission to adequately hear and consider issues. And that's the exact reason that the commission needs to have the tolling language in order to protect the commission's ability to both review the stipulation or, if rejected, to have enough time to hold hearings on the underlying application, to have a factually and legally adequate basis for its final decision, and to be able to appropriately consider public interest considerations. The commission disagrees with the motion's claim that the tolling language will discourage settlements. In the present case, in the past two rate cases that SPS has filed, case number 19-00170 and case number 20-00238, both had the tolling provision, but in both cases, SPS and the parties were able to enter into a stipulation, which the commission did approve in both cases, and which neither have been appealed. And for this reason, the commission in its discretion finds that it should not grant the interlocutory appeal, and that instead it should open up a rulemaking so that the stakeholders for all the New Mexico investor-owned utilities can participate in the rulemaking and ultimately arrive at a rule that will provide guidance to the IOUs and stakeholders and will provide certainty for future rate cases. The commission finds that while SPS raises legitimate concerns about the fact that the tolling provision does not actually state that the tolling is limited to a specific number of months, the commission believes that the best avenue for determining the parameters of the tolling provision is in a rulemaking instead. And so those are the options that the commission has, and I stand for questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Judith?
I have one question. Can you clarify under the first proposed order whether there is any discussion of a rulemaking being opened?
No, there was not discussion of a rulemaking, but that could be added to the first order as well. So that is something that could be added to the first order.
And I just wanted to clarify under the current commission rules, when a utility submits a settlement or a stipulation, we are asking them to agree to this tolling, the suspension of the time clock.
It is not stated in the current commission rule. It's been stated in the procedural orders issued by the hearing examiners. And as I stated, SPS has previously appealed that provision in case number 19-00170. But in that case, in 2020, the commission issued an order denying that interlocutory appeal. And therefore, at this point, it is commission precedent to support the tolling of the suspension period. But again, this is a new commission and we can review that precedent.
Does the hearing examiner state those procedural orders at the beginning of each new case, or is it simply considered established precedent?
That's a good question. And yes, after the initial order suspending the rates, the hearing examiners hold a conference prior to issuing the first procedural order. At that conference, a variety of provisions are decided. For instance, when direct testimony will be filed, when rebuttal will be filed, when the public hearing will be held, when stipulations are needed to be filed. I'm sure I missed some things, but that being said, at that conference, the tolling provision is discussed. And then after the conference, the hearing examiners issue their first procedural order, setting out all those different dates and includes the tolling provision language in the first procedural order.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and explain how I got to us having two orders in front of ourselves. First, just want to reaffirm that I believe in the policy of encouraging settlements. We should be encouraging settlements, and the issues raised by SPS in the appeal are worthy of consideration. I don't want actions that were taken to have a chilling effect on parties reaching settlements in cases. So that was my broad view going into reviewing this. Then looked at what this appeal is, and I concluded that granting the relief sought isn't a vehicle to solving the problem. These issues that have been raised are bigger than just the tolling period. That is an issue, but should contested stipulations be treated different than uncontested stipulations? These are all really good questions, and again, worthy of examination. I also looked at the history of it, and this language has been in use by the commission since at least 2018. There have been several settlements under the provisions of that language. So just that gave me pause to think that, hey, is this truly a problem? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. So then again, going back to, let's assume there is a problem and it should be solved. What's the best way to solve it? If we do something in this SPS rate case, there's a limited set of interveners in the SPS rate case. There are several parties that I know participate in rate cases with other utilities. There's the other utilities that are not interveners in this SPS rate case right now. So if we wanted to do a hearing on this issue within the confines of this case, we'd be excluding important voices from that conversation. So that was a big turn for me. And then when I went back and read the SPS paperwork and realized that this issue isn't ripe, meaning my non-lawyer explanation of that is don't holler till you're hurt. So until we actually toll the time and that tolling affects when the case is decided, there hasn't been harm. So those three things led me to think that a better approach would be to deny this request for appeal in this rate case. And then again, acknowledging that these are issues that are potentially important, starting with, are we having a chilling effect on people entering settlements? A better vehicle for that would be something like a rulemaking proceeding where we can include everybody that would be affected by making a change. So anyway, that's how over the past few days, we've gone from looking at an order to approve to a order to deny.
Thank you, Chair. Your comments resonate with me. I support settlements whenever possible to avoid costly and time-consuming litigation. However, the commission also must ensure that the settlement is fair and just and reasonable, and we need sufficient time to make that determination. So tolling the suspension period balances, I think, flexibility for the parties to settle and ensuring that the commission has enough time to evaluate whether the settlement is fair, just, and reasonable. I am sympathetic to SPS's concerns about the uncertainty created by the existing tolling provision because the provision does not include a deadline for when the tolling period will end. I understand that the commission has not unreasonably delayed action on a rate filing despite the lack of an end date. And, as you noted, there have been settlements that have been reached under this tolling provision. But nevertheless, SPS raises valid concerns. I think that we should reevaluate, and I agree with you and with SPS that the tolling provision has impacts beyond this case. And so I support a rulemaking that addresses this concern. And the regulated utilities, as you noted, tend to have different intervening parties. And so we should invite their opinions as well. And I think that the rulemaking is the appropriate vehicle to do that. That said, I am persuaded by the point that perhaps granting the appeal is premature. And I understand that denying the appeal is also consistent with past precedent. And therefore I would be comfortable approving the alternative order that Chair O'Connell has proposed.
I'd like to say a few words. I'm leaning towards voting in favor of granting the appeal requested by SPS. Just by way of background for folks listening who may not be deeply familiar with these rate cases, there's a strict time clock on a rate case. The commission is able to extend by 9 months and then another 3 months. But if the commission has not made a decision by the end of that time period, the rates requested by the utility automatically go into effect. And that's clearly quite a strong incentive for the PUC to issue timely decisions. The argument being made here is that, when a settlement or stipulation is proposed, the commission has typically stopped the clock until a decision is made, and that could be indefinite. As Commissioner Aguilera said, I don't think it's ever really been indefinite. It hasn't really taken years for the commission to come to a decision, but theoretically, it could be an indefinite delay. And SPS is arguing that seems to run counter to the idea of having a limited amount of time for the commission to make a decision. I am sympathetic to that argument. I do agree that the best course of action would be to do a rulemaking that applies to everyone, and I think that should happen. At the same time, I think that we could do both things. We could grant this appeal, receive briefings, make a decision in fairly short order, and we can do the rulemaking. The rulemaking, obviously, the issue is that the rulemaking would not be in time for this particular rate case that SPS has before us. And I interpret their interest here as, signaling that they may want to do a settlement, and they would like some assurance that we're not going to take an unlimited amount of time. And I don't think that if we were to make a decision on SPS's request, I don't think that ties our hands in terms of what we do in the overall rate making. I think it obviously sets a precedent, but we could decide on a different amount of time or different conditions based on the input that we get from a wider rulemaking. So I guess I'm saying here that I'm leaning towards granting the appeal, but I do agree that we, in any case, ought to do the wider rulemaking on the issue.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. You have highlighted some important points that I was thinking about also. Just maybe doesn't need to be said, but one thing that's true about a stipulated agreement in the third scenario, a contested stipulation, is it doesn't change our obligation as a commission to review. So the fact that parties have agreed on issues might clarify it and make, give us the conservation of resources, because there will be less time spent maybe on a hearing and those type of things, but it doesn't change fundamentally our obligation to make a good decision. The other thing that I was thinking through was kind of a logistical concern is the procedural order in the case right now. The stipulation would be due May 8th. And so sitting here on February 1st and trying to imagine how we could consider those issues with the depth that's required between now and then leaving the parties still some months to actually do a stipulation was another thing I was hanging up on. And maybe that's not a primary concern, that we could build a schedule that would work for that. But it wasn't just folks aren't present in this case that would be affected by the action that we potentially affected by the action that we take in this case. It was also having a valuable or well-run process within the confines of the fact that this case was filed and the clock is ticking.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellison. I initially was thinking the same way as you. I think one thing that continues to bother me if we were to grant the appeal here is that we might be getting ahead of the rulemaking, because I just don't know how, what deadline we would stipulate, and I wouldn't want to create precedent in this case that could then hurt us in the future, even after we, go through a rulemaking process. And so in order to sort of treat SPS the same as any other future filer, I think I would be more comfortable if we started if SPS's rate case were to go through the existing procedures, and then we can reevaluate and make sure that any new procedures apply to everybody. but I do share the same concern about the indefinite tolling period, and I think that should be corrected.
Okay, so if there isn't any further discussion or we can continue discussion, just I think I'd entertain a motion for one or the other, and then that will focus our further discussions again.
I mean, I will make a motion, but wanted to give Commissioner Ellison another opportunity in case he wanted to make additional comments.
Yeah, I think I'm, yeah, I think I've said what I wanted to say on the matter. I don't think it would be to some extent a precedent, but it doesn't, bind what we would do in a, doesn't control what we would do in a overall, in an overall case.
Yeah, so I guess I want to point out another thing, is that my understanding is that there's also nothing in the Public Utilities Act that would preclude a filer to commence the settlement procedures before the filing is made. So there is sort of an incentive in this process to wait to file a settlement. And so that is another reason that sort of persuades me to just sort of, do the rulemaking and then start fresh. So that said, I would like to make a motion to approve the alternate order that was provided by Commissioner O'Connell.
I'll second that motion. Again, any more discussion, or do you want to vote on that motion, or do you want to make a separate motion? It's fine. We can vote.
I'll take the roll. Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison,
Nay.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The motion passes 2-0, 2-1.
Thank you, and I appreciate the discussion around this. And you make some great points, Mr. Ellison, Commissioner. Okay, the next item on the agenda is discussion and potential action, consideration and offer of employment for Chief of Staff position. As discussed earlier in this meeting, we've had a couple executive sessions. We've interviewed several candidates for Chief of Staff, and have discussed the merits of the candidates. I believe we're at a point where we're ready to make an offer of employment. So we'll open it up for discussion and potential motion on that idea. Okay, if there's no further discussion, then I'll go ahead and make a motion. I would move that the PRC extend an offer of employment to Ms. Choya Corey for the Chief of Staff.
I will second that motion.
And let's go ahead and take a roll on that.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is something that previous commissions have done, but it's new for us, is just discussion of potential action regarding legislative matters. What was noticed on the agenda is a long list of bills that the commission has provided financial impact reports on. We don't need to discuss each one of these bills. I wanted to have this on the agenda to discuss one bill in particular, Senate Bill 144. Just have a discussion and then maybe potentially decide if we want to publicly support or oppose any one of these bills. But, you know, my thought was, let's talk about that one in particular. Senate Bill 144 has been sponsored by Senator Munoz, and it's to purchase existing state office building, and with the idea that that could be a future home for PRC. The building we're in right now is a lease, and it is expensive to live in, you know, for many reasons. Like, for example, we pay a large bill for parking and those type of things. So anyway, that's what is in that bill. So I guess I'll start with, are there any other bills that commissioners would like to discuss? And so we'll prioritize those and then circle back on Senate Bill 144.
I don't have any other bills to bring up.
Neither do I.
Okay. So with that, then I guess I would make a motion that the commission publicly support Senate Bill 144 and public. So that's the motion. My idea of what public support would be is do things like show up in committee hearings and express that the commission is grateful to the senator for proposing it and in support of legislation passing it. So that's the motion and my starting of a discussion on that.
I second that motion. I think that sounds like a good bill for us to take a stand on.
Should I take a roll call?
Yes. Thank you.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0.
Okay, and then before we move on from that action item, there were a couple more bills that came in the past week that I've seen that the commission has issued financial impact reports. So, and some of them are things that maybe we want to talk about. So I think I'll be asking that this item is on the agenda next time, and there will be some more bills added to this list. So just heads up. And commissioners, as always, feel free to add whatever bills you want to discuss to the agenda. Okay, next is communications with commissioners. You know, we're still understanding the world we're in with individual conversations constituting a quorum, and so apologize to my fellow commissioners that I haven't given them a heads up on what it is that I want to talk about. So I hope that none of this is controversial, and happy to continue the conversation at future meetings if it's something you want to consider further. But I'll go ahead and get started with my list. One is, I know I did, and I see from the carbon copy list, I think each of us received invitation from the New Mexico Renewable Energy Transmission and Storage Authority, or New Mexico Renewable Energy Transmission Authority, to discuss some recent work that they have produced. I would like to take them up on that invitation. I think understanding what's going on in New Mexico, especially the work that Rita does, is important to the work that we do. So my idea is go ahead and accept this invitation, and I'm happy to work with scheduling to try to find a time for New Mexico Rita to come to one of these meetings and provide a presentation. Okay, so receiving some head nods, so I think that wasn't controversial. So I will continue with working with Rita, and we'll see them on the agenda in a future meeting. And then the other thing is just highlight and reminder that we've got a list of organizations or committees that are beyond the Public Regulation Commission, you know, like having one of us as a member of Southwest Power Pool is the most obvious one. I've been participating in just learning exercises around how greenhouse gas accounting might work under different regional market structures. That's an educational opportunity that I've been taking advantage of. Certainly both of you should take advantage of that if you want. We'll be going to the neighborhood meeting in a couple of weeks, and this list of things that is potential for us to participate in is only going to grow. So just the communication item for me was just a reminder that the list is out there, and at some point, I think we need to have that discussion and start participating in these groups the best we can. Some of it might mean several potential notices of quorum. So like if I'm on a Zoom call to learn about greenhouse gas accounting and one of you want to be on that call too, then I think what we'll do in that case is just notice that more than one of us will be in attendance at that session. But anyway, that's just the kind of the detail to work out. Other things like SPP, I think there's only one slot open, so we'll have to make choices of which of us should do that, and hopefully we can make that choice in a way that can best serve the mission of the PRC and the work we're here to do for New Mexico. So that was the extent of my communication, just a reminder that thing's out there, and would like to bring that to a next step soon. So those are my two items.
I have one item that I would like to raise, and this is concerning the open meeting policy. I think it was 2 meetings ago, I said that I would ask staff to reevaluate the open meeting policy and which day is best for the commission to meet. So staff is in the process of evaluating that, and I sort of asked for an options memo that gives 2 or 3 different options for different meeting dates for the commission's open business meeting. And it would take into consideration all of the types of filings and proceedings that we have, and how the deadlines that are associated with those, whether they are statutory deadlines or deadlines in the commission's regulations. And one thing that I would like to highlight is that I also asked staff to consider whether meeting every 2 weeks instead of weekly is something that we can do and continue to meet our obligations. I think that is a good model personally, and there are some very successful commissions in the West that meet every 2 weeks. I think that internally would give us more time to properly evaluate pleadings and send memos and orders to the commissioners, and hopefully give also staff more time as they're working on memos and orders and other tasks. So another thing that would be included is basically a list of, I think I already mentioned this, but of the pleadings and the deadlines, and then sort of an illustration of the process under each of the different options. And so staff would be providing that memo to us, and we'd be able to consider the different options. So just wanted to let you know, and the audience as well, that sort of looking into the internal structure that we have, and hopefully this is something that will benefit all of us, including stakeholders and utilities, to make sure that we have the proper procedures in place to evaluate cases and make the right decisions. So, thank you.
Do we expect the memo to come out soon then? Or?
Yes, I think we are expecting it. You should be receiving it. Maybe like in a couple of weeks. I asked staff to create their own deadline. Given the other work that they have, I didn't want to just give an arbitrary deadline. So they sort of looked at that. And so I expect within the next couple of weeks that you'll receive a memo.
Appreciate that. And that question is top of mind because some of the stuff in the SPS case was a affirmation that deadlines are valuable. So.
So I also feel like sometimes I'm springing some issues on Commissioners O'Connell and Aguilera that we haven't discussed beforehand because we really shouldn't be talking about things. Just to follow up on an issue I brought up last meeting on the renewable energy data. I do think it makes sense to give more thought and to seek input as to the kind of data and frequency of reporting that would best serve us. Clearly, the commission is charged with monitoring and ensuring that New Mexico utilities do meet the mandatory renewable portfolio standard requirements in the Renewable Energy Act and the Energy Transition Act. I tend to think that, perhaps some sort of a quarterly statement from the utilities would be beneficial to us in that regard. What I have in mind is not something that would be overly burdensome, but maybe just a table where the utilities are reporting on, say, megawatt hours of production from renewable sources and megawatt hours of retail sales, and then the RPS percentage calculation for that quarter. So, that may perhaps, that could not be used for compliance purposes because we have this whole REC renewable energy certificate mechanism for looking at compliance with the renewable portfolio standard. But, just to give us more insights and a little more frequent snapshots into how the utilities are performing, I think that would be helpful in the integrated resource planning process as we think about it. And perhaps we might want to specify a table that should be in that annual report. I think we could think about whether rural electric co-ops should be part of that reporting or not. I'm thinking about in a future open meeting proposing a notice of proposed rulemaking on the collection of this renewable energy data. So that's one thing I have in mind. Another issue is reliability data. I've spoken to Mr. Rilkoff, who is in charge of our utilities division, and we do get a an annual report that includes some typical indicators, distribution reliability indicators like the system average, duration and frequency of interruptions. But it appears that we don't have any minimum standards set for, what we consider to be adequate reliability. And therefore, we don't have any sort of mechanism in place to for a remedy if a utility is not meeting those standards, because there aren't any. So I guess I just wanted to plant a seed at this point for us to be thinking about what we might want to do about that in the future. I did want to mention that I do plan to attend that NARUC meeting in Washington, D.C. on February 12th and 13th.
Thank you. And then I guess follow-up question on the renewables thing. Are you working with somebody on staff to help create the vehicle to get that moving, or?
I will do so.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, worth exploring. Similar with the reliability.
We can work with Commissioner Ellison on a note here.
Okay, thank you. And I think the other thing, we've talked about several rulemakings today, so it'd be also good to figure out how to prioritize and stage those too, just because we have a few other cases going on right now. So
We have a rulemaking spreadsheet. So that just contains our current rulemakings and where we are, but we could share that with you.
it might be worth it to have a presentation on that at the next meeting.
We can do that.
Can you do that? Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Ellison's good suggestions. I think these are good ideas to be thinking about, and I appreciate you raising them. I think one thing that would be helpful is, as you're working with staff, if before we talk about it and have a big conversation about it at a meeting, it would be helpful to sort of have like a page that, like, one page explanation of what we're thinking, like some of the parameters, whether some of this data is available already, and just like how often the reporting would it be the same for the co-ops and the IOUs and that kind of information. I think that would be helpful. And as long as we're sort of talking about things that we've been thinking about, I have been thinking about resource adequacy. So I plan to start, just getting more up to speed on that. And I understand that, for example, there's have been meetings that PNM has had biweekly, and I guess at this point voluntarily, because they were with respect to the summer of 2022. But at some point, I think it would be good to have a presentation at a future meeting, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and hearing the same information. And if there's anything that the commission needs to do to prepare, we should do that as soon as possible. So yeah.
The commission previously in October held a workshop where the 3 IOUs were present, It was held in Albuquerque, and they each gave presentations regarding resource adequacy. And we could schedule another type of workshop like that if the commission would like us to.
Yeah, it's my understanding that things are fairly dynamic in that world right now, like status of supply contracts and those type of things. So glad to hear that happened, and that might be a great framework for just, let's have an update to see what's changed, and as we get, we definitely want to have the information while there's still time to act if required for the upcoming summer.
Yeah, I mean, if we have, if we know some dates, and if you want to have it in Albuquerque again, we can arrange to have a location. We had the location we had didn't have very good microphone setup, but we could find another location.
Thank you. I guess, would you be willing to coordinate that with staff?
I would be happy to coordinate that. Yeah, thank you.
So any other discussion, fellow commissioners?
I don't think so.
Becoming more comfortable throwing that commissioner word around, so I think that gets us through our agenda for today's meeting. Appreciate the discussion. I know I learned a lot, and I think we're adjourned.